Despite being a busy month, May was actually surprisingly good in terms of my media consumption. Good in the sense that I consumed a lot, including finishing 4 movies and 9 books, which, given the fact that it was the month of the Goober Readathon, that is a very pleasing statistic. Of course, that means plenty to fill in my reading journal, so let's get into it. The first book that I finished in the month I had actually started in April, that one being The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is a book that was recommended to me from my friend Rachel, mainly because she really liked it. She thought it was kind of like a fun, cheesy, rom-com-esque, but like also self-aware book. Like the characters in the book knew that they were acting in accordance with typical rom-com tropes. And I think that kind of made it even more fun. Also the fact that this book has our main characters set in the world of STEM, with both of them being at a postgraduate level in biology. As someone who did a science degree, that's also something that really appealed to me. It was fun to see the sprinkling in of different scientific phrases and such that I'm familiar with, but I don't think that the jargon really took away from the story, so even if you're not someone who has a science background, you can probably still get enjoyment out of this one. I ended up giving this one 5 stars just because I had so much fun reading it. Is it literary genius? No, not so much. But honestly, when it comes to reading fiction, that's not really what I'm looking for. I just want to have a good time, and this book was definitely a good time. In terms of decorating the page though, I found that I am sorely lacking in science-related stickers, so I mainly opted to use some love-related washi tapes, and this also maximized my writing space. While I do try and avoid spoilers during my voiceovers, the same can't be said for what I've written on the page, so if you don't want to be spoiled, just don't look too closely. The general plot of the book though surrounds the fake dating trope, and I think this is my first book that I've read with the fake dating trope, or at least the first one that I remember. As can be expected, fake feelings lead to real feelings, and I think I will read more from Ali Hazelwood and her STEM romances, because I know she has ones for other areas of STEM as well. The second book that I ended up reading for the month was also a recommendation from Rachel, kinda. She recommended it in the sense of like, hey, let's read this together, as opposed to, hey, this is good and you should read it. In particular, I think the part that appealed was the idea that this was directed towards mothers. Notably, Rachel is a mother, I am not. And as someone who has read books on decluttering before, there wasn't necessarily a lot of new information in this one. I didn't find it quite as impactful as The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, though that book in particular is probably a special case because it was my first self-help book that I remember reading, and it kind of got me set down the journey of reading more self-help books. For this one though, I did almost DNF it at the start, mainly because there was some kind of like religious content, and that's not something I'm really looking for in my non-fiction reads. I decided to keep going though and give it the good college try, and that aspect of the book was short-lived, so I'm not sad that I continued. I in particular liked the emphasis that the author had on thinking about a space and its function, what you want that space to do for you, before you start decluttering. I think it's kind of a good guiding idea to have whenever you're going to declutter a space, because it just helps you keep the end in mind, and it helps you be more intentional with your decluttering process. I ended up giving that one 3.5 stars, which effectively for me means it was a solid read, and I don't regret reading it, but it wasn't quite as impactful as I had hoped. The next little blurb we're doing isn't for a book, but is instead for a movie, because I like to include all types of media in my reading journal, mainly because if I had a separate journal for movies and TV shows and games, my lineup would be very overwhelming. I'd rather just have them all in here, and it also means that I'm more likely to use this journal up in 1 year, which I kind of like the idea of. That's not to say you have to use a journal up in a year, but I like the idea of this being my 2025 media journal, with all of my media in here. But I'm gonna keep calling it a reading journal, mainly because there's more books than anything else. This movie though was Vogel and mine's first date night for the month. We've been seeming to do more of those recently, which has been quite nice, but we ended up going and seeing Sinners. One of my big pain points with movies recently, and also possibly part of the reason why I don't go and see things at the cinema, is that I just feel like movie studios have stopped doing good trailers. Like, they give away the majority of the movie in the trailer, but at the same time, I kind of like to watch the trailer so I can figure out if I want to watch the movie. A lot of the time when I go to watch a trailer for a movie, I will just watch half of it, because then it starts to get too spoilery and I just don't want to watch the rest, because then I might as well not watch the movie. But the trailer for Sinners, I think, was done really well to not give away what the kind of like antagonist of the movie is. So of course, I was very dismayed to go and try and look up a fact about the movie before it started and instantly spoil that for myself. Like, we're literally sitting down with our popcorn to start the movie and I saw a spoiler. In my blurb here, I didn't write so much about the film, mainly because I don't have all that much space, but for me, the blurbs that I'm writing down is essentially memory keeping of any piece of media. It doesn't have to be specifically about the plot or the characters or anything like that. It's just what I want to write about at any point in time. So for this one, I just noted down that the reason we went out was to pick the color of Vogel's suit for our wedding. Essentially, anytime we go out to do a wedding related thing, because it's really close to where the cinema is, we've just been going to the cinema for a date night as well. It's kind of like a reward for doing the things on my wedding checklist. If you're not into jump scares though, this movie might not be for you. There's not that many, but I swear there was like 2 or 3 at the very start of the film. Ridiculous. But I ended up giving Sinners 4 out of 5 stars. So it was a really enjoyable movie. I'd recommend it to others, even though there were some parts that weren't perfect. Flipping over though, and it's time to write in the blurb for a book that I have been excited to read for quite a while. And this one is actually outside of the typical genres I read, which made it even more exciting. A lot of the time I read fantasy, romance, romantasy, and self-help, but this one was more of a mystery thriller. That book, of course, is The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw from Sarah Cannon, and given the fact that I watch Sarah and Heart Breathings online, and I've seen her progress throughout writing the book and getting it published, I've been really excited to pick this one up, and I thought that picking it up for the Goober Readathon would be an excellent idea. I was so committed to that I specifically added it to my 5-book TBR for the readathon, mainly to encourage other people to read it as well. If you read it, let me know in the comments, but I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Now, I know for a fact that I am biased because I love Sarah, she's just a really good egg, but even with that, I think that this book was excellent. It is YA, so if you're not typically into YA fiction, then it might not be for you, but in the marketing for this book, it says stuff like, One of Us is Lying meets Until Dawn. And I know Until Dawn is a game. One of Us is Lying, I think. At least it's a TV show. I don't know if it's a book as well, but I can totally see the Until Dawn vibes. I haven't even played Until Dawn, but having now read this book, I really want to play Until Dawn. I really loved the multiple POVs that we got throughout the book and getting to see the kind of backstory for each of the characters, their relationships with each other, and the clues that eventually lead us to, you know, the whodunit. And I think it was also fun to read what is now Sarah's most recent publication, after having read a couple of her older ones, which are from like 2010 and before. Given the fact that it's a mystery, I don't really want to tell you too much, but the general premise is that we have a teenage girl, Vanessa Shaw, who has gone missing, and we're joining her friend group back at her family's secluded cabin on the river for one last party before the group goes on to start their senior year. Everyone has something to hide, and everyone has some kind of reason for why they may have wanted Vanessa to be gone, and our main character Lorelei figures that we're probably not going to be leaving this weekend unless we can figure out the truth. As said, I know I'm biased. I really enjoyed it anyway. This one was a 5-star from me. One of the things that I am notoriously bad at when it comes to consuming media is not finishing it. In particular, not finishing TV shows, which is why I am always a fan of TV shows that are kind of finite, they're not ongoing, and in particular, they have finished in a way that wasn't them getting cancelled, it was them actually wrapping up their story. For that reason, I was very excited to be finishing off You, the TV show You, not you as an individual. But in April, the 5th and final season came out, and I was just so pleased that it was better than season 4. In terms of ranking the seasons, for me personally, I think that 1 was definitely the best, 2 was the second best, then I would put season 5, which is the one that I was just watching, and then it would be 3 and 4. Season 4 was just kind of weird. If you haven't watched it and you're thinking about watching it, I don't want to give too much away, but this one is a psychological thriller series, which is based on a book series, and our main character, Joe Goldberg, is a book-loving serial killer, who every time he falls in love, it just does not go well, usually because of him. Because this is the 5th and final season, I don't want to tell you too much, but something that I very much did appreciate throughout the series, and also in this season in particular, is that you don't really know who you're rooting for. Like, we know that Joe is not the good guy, but he is also the main character. So there's kind of a conflict point there because we want good things for him, but he really doesn't deserve good things. We know he is faux show delusional, but we also see him being very aware of how his own childhood has kind of impacted and influenced his life in a negative way. One of the things that I'm always weary of when it comes to TV shows is having a final season that doesn't do the rest of the series justice. Like, it kind of feels like you just threw out everything you established in the show, and the ending just doesn't feel satisfying. Yes, I am definitely talking about How I Met Your Mother here. In terms of You, though, I actually felt that the ending was pretty decent. Endings are difficult to do, and I wasn't disappointed by this one. I also really loved that at the end, we effectively get called out for having a whole bad boy fetish. And it does make you question, like, the amount of things that people can get away with because they're conventionally attractive. But I also feel like the majority of people who read and watch media with morally grey characters don't necessarily actually want that in their own partner. I don't typically rate TV shows out of 5 stars or anything, mainly because it's just difficult to do. Like, there are so many episodes and so many different things that could impact my view of the show. And especially given the fact that I write these reviews up at the very end, it is very much colored by the end of the series. But in general, I did like this season, and I thought it was a good wrap up to the series. Flipping on over though, and back to books, another one that I put down on my TBR for the Goober Readathon was Undead and Unwed. Now, I have read this book before. I read it back when I was like 15 or something. And given that, this book is definitely a little bit dated, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless. I think that now, as I have read what are arguably better romance fantasy books, I probably would have rated this one higher when I first read it, but at the time it was also my first experience with this kind of book too. In this one, our main character, Betsy, is having what is arguably the worst day of her life. She ends up late to work, she gets fired, she then gets hit by a vehicle and dies, but then also doesn't stay dead and wakes up in the most hideous outfit known to man, in a funeral home, in an unimpressive coffin, with very ugly shoes, which do not belong to her. They belong to her stepmother. Turns out that Betsy is now a vampire, and despite genuinely not wanting to, she now has to navigate vampire politics and help overthrow the most obnoxious, power-hungry vampire in 5 centuries. As said, there are definitely better romance fantasy books, and there are probably definitely better ones about vampires, but regardless of that, I really like this book. I'll probably continue with the series. It's not at the top of my TBR, but I did find it to be a bit of fun. Also interesting to revisit something that I read such a while ago. Most of the time when we reread things that we enjoyed a lot in childhood, it can be very hit and miss, so it was nice for this one to still be a hit for me. I do definitely feel like the main character will probably rub some people the wrong way, but I just appreciated that she was a little bit different to other main characters that we had at that time. In particular, just the fact that she's specifically called out for being tall, because I feel like, and maybe it's just the books that I've been reading recently, have a lot of petite female main characters, so it was nice to have one that's built a little bit more like a tower. Now, I do say that my favorite genre is self-help, is at least the genre that shows up the most on my TBR, but what I don't really read is other non-fiction categories. In particular, I don't really read books about history, like, ever. I'd be pretty hard pressed to tell you the last time I read a history book. So when I picked up Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green, I was a little bit skeptical as to whether I was gonna like it. I wanted to read it because he was gonna be the keynote speaker at Go Wild, so I figured it would be good to read something that he'd written, and I figured it made sense to go with his most recent release, this one having been published in 2025. Now, despite the fact that history is not an interest point of mine, and neither really is Tuberculosis, I actually thought this was a really good book. I thought it was really interesting the way that he wove the kind of like story elements with general history, how he showed the connection between tuberculosis and a bunch of different other problems in life, and also how he talked about like patents and the accessibility of medical care, and also how people's adherence to systems of medical care can be so very influenced by socioeconomic factors, and also the glamorization of the disease because it gave people a desirable complexion. I was actually really glad that I read this one, even though it wasn't a topic I would typically read about, and it was really great to have read the majority of it before meeting him at Go Wild, because Mark and I got to do behind the scenes interviews with the speakers, just many ones, but it was nice to be able to talk to him and tell him how I felt about the book too. He was a really good speaker, and I'm really glad that I read it before having got to see him on stage. I ended up giving that one 4 stars out of 5, mainly because even though I really enjoyed the book, it is still not my kind of typical read. It's not something I would consider a perfect book for me. especially because when I rate something 5 stars, it's because it is for sure a favorite read of mine. I super enjoyed it, I'm going to be thinking about it for ages, and I'm probably going to reread it. This is not the kind of book that I will probably reread, but it is certainly one that I'd recommend to others. The next 2 pieces of media I'm writing up reviews for though are both movies and actually both musicals. The main reason I ended up watching these is because of a book that I also read during May. Not one that I have a review for in here yet, but we'll be doing that one in a second. But given that the main character of that book was really into musicals, once I'd finished it, I was just hankering to watch a musical. And thankfully, this was just before a 14-hour flight, so I got to watch 2 of them and also have a sleep. The ones I ended up watching were Wicked and Hairspray, and I ended up giving those 4.5 stars and 3.5 stars respectively. I think that watching Wicked on the plane probably wasn't like the best idea, especially given at the end of the film you're like, getting all in your feels and stuff, and I'm just sitting there on the plane quietly crying to myself. It's not typically what I want to be doing in public. But that being said, one of the things that really got me about Wicked was that it's a part 1, and you didn't necessarily know that from any of the advertising materials until you went and sat down at the cinema and it pops up on the screen. Very sneaky. I don't know what they're going to call the second one. Is it going to be called Wicked Part 2, or... I haven't actually seen the stage performance of Wicked, so I kind of know where the story is going. I've seen The Wizard of Oz, but I don't necessarily know how things get wrapped up. I think that the performances from our 2 female leads were absolutely excellent, though I do wish that there were subtitles in the cinema the first time I saw it, mainly for the songs that have really high parts, especially when Ariana was singing, because I'm like, I know those are words, but I don't know what those words are. And as someone who hasn't seen the stage performance, isn't really familiar with the songs outside of Defying Gravity, didn't necessarily know what was being said at those points. On the plane though, that was all good, because in that context we do have subtitles. In terms of Hairspray, I was still in a musical mood, so I put that one on as well. And while this one was a bit of fun, I found that the romance between Link and Tracy was just really unbelievable. Not in the sense of why would a conventionally attractive character played by Zac Efron be attracted to an overweight character like Tracy, but more so they don't really know each other. They haven't really had a lot of time to get to know each other. And we also have that part where Link, Zac Efron's character, walks into Tracy's bedroom and it's just plastered with pictures of his face. I wouldn't really see that as an endearing quality. I would be more so freaked out. I do think that the general storyline of acceptance of different people and inclusion and all of that kind of thing could have done without the romance that we ended up with. I think if we had have dedicated the time spent on the romance building that wasn't even there, the whatever minimal moments we had of it, if we had have dedicated that to the other kind of more central plot line, I think that would have been a better use of time. That's it though, still enjoyed the movie, gave it 3.5 stars. Flipping over and setting up for another 5-star piece of media though, this is one that I had been meaning to get around to for quite a while, much to the pestering of Rachel and Monica, mainly because both of them read it last year in February and loved it and have kept telling me that I will also love it, and they weren't wrong. I gave it 5 stars. This one is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This one's part of a duology, so I'm very eager to read the second part. I haven't just yet. But the general gist for this one is that our female main character, Elspeth, has a monster trapped in her head. While he does protect her, that protection also comes with a cost. In the world that the book is set, magic is controlled by what are called Providence cards, and there are 12 different types with different levels of rarity. These different cards allow their carriers to do different types of magic, but all of that magic does come with a cost. I found this to be a really captivating story. I thought that the magic system was really interesting. I haven't seen anything like that before. That's not to say it isn't out there, I just haven't read it. I like the fact that our female main character isn't actually good at fighting or anything like that. It's just this monster trapped inside her head, which can take over and do things for her. That one's good at dealing with those kind of problems. This book definitely leaves on a bit of a cliffhanger, so do not make the mistake I did and not having the next book immediately available to go on with. If I had have had it available, I would have moved on to it straight away, but sadly, I was on a plane with no Wi-Fi and no ability to get said book. The second one is called Two Twisted Crowns, and it is for sure on my list for June. Even though I gave this one 5 stars, that doesn't mean that the book isn't without its problems. One of the things that I both liked and also disliked was the way that we were introduced to the cards and how they work. While we are told this kind of throughout the body of the story, we do have little epigraphs at the start of each of the chapters that tell us a bit more about the world. These are done in kind of a sing-songy way, but I didn't feel like they were always perfectly matched with the content of the chapter. If we compare this to something like The Love Hypothesis, the epigraphs we had in that were very matched to the chapter, and also worded in the way of like a hypothesis, which was kind of cute because the book was called The Love Hypothesis. Yeah. In terms of decorating this page though, I wanted to leave it fairly open to write things down, and I also wanted to touch on the idea of the cards, but the cards don't actually look like traditional playing cards. I just stuck pictures of cards in general because it kind of fits the vibe. One of the bonuses for reading this book though is not only do I get to include it for the Goober Readathon, but it was also selected to be part of my 12 recommendations from friends challenge for the year. And I also put it on my 25 books to read in 2025. So just checking off all of the reading challenges with this one. Another one of the reading challenges that I have for the year is completing all of our book club books, and that's going to be the review that we're putting into the top right hand space here. Our book club read for May was Dungeons and Drama, and I think I just got lucky with the books that I was reading this month, or maybe I made really good choices, but I really enjoyed this one as well. Again, not a perfect read, not for everyone. It is YA, so if that's not really your scene, then it's not probably going to be for you. We have the fake dating trope again, which I thought was kind of fun to read 2 books with the fake dating trope in 1 month, mainly just to make little comparisons between them and see the kind of similarities or similar elements. But given the fact that this is YA and that our main characters are in high school, that does mean that some of the choices that they make are... they're choices, they are choices. The first choice is stealing your mother's car to go to an out-of-town musical, which does actually have consequences though, because now she's being forced to work at her dad's game shop, which of course is where she meets the male love interest, and they start fake dating, and it's just cute. It's a cute book, and yes, some of the things were a little juvenile, but I loved it all the same. This of course was the book that encouraged me to watch those 2 musicals on the plane, mainly because our female main character is all about musicals and musical theatre and performance, whereas our male main character is more into gaming, D&D. Thus the title, Dungeons and Drama. I just thought it was a cute exploration of the idea of don't knock it till you try it, because at the start of the book, our female main character really doesn't understand the appeal of games, but throughout the story realizes that they actually can be a lot of fun, especially where she gets to find crossover between musical theatre and D&D. One of my favourite things about reading the book club books though is getting to have the book club meeting. This one's done online via Discord at the end of each month, and this one definitely had some varied opinions, which I personally prefer because it makes for better discussion. We had a lot of people who, like me, really enjoyed it, but also seemingly an equal amount of people who really didn't. They found the main character very unlikable, they found themselves siding with the parents more than the kids, which, like, fair because the kids weren't always making the greatest choices, but that's what's great about the book club meetings. We all get to share these opinions and thoughts because we don't all have to enjoy the book to have good discussions about it. And in fact, typically the discussions are better when we have varying opinions. If you wanted to join our book club, it is completely free and fully online. That one's hosted over in our reading community on Discord, which is linked in the description box below. We'd love to have you with us if you wanted to join. In the bottom right though, this is where I'm going to be putting in my review for our second date night for the month. This one again to the cinema, but this time to see Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Now, I definitely should have watched the first Reckoning? That is not the title. Dead Reckoning. I should have watched Dead Reckoning before I watched this one because I couldn't remember anything. And I also feel like it made some of the things that were happening to our characters a lot less impactful because I felt like I didn't really remember the characters all that well. And some of them have been around since like the second movie, so yeah. In this final installment of the Mission Impossible movie series though, we are again following Ethan Hunt, or Tom Cruise, as he aims to take on Big Bad to stop the end of the world. which is effectively the plot of every single one of the movies. This time though, the big bad is AI. Though technically speaking, in the last movie, the big bad was AI as well. It's just that this is like a part 2, which is again why I should have watched Dead Reckoning before I saw this one. Thankfully we have fairly decent summaries online, so I literally sat there before the trailers started just reading over what had happened in the previous film. And of course we pulled up to the cinema and Vogel tells me that he watched it while I was away in the States. I'm like, rude, could have waited for me. I also thought it was kind of fun that last year when I got back from Go Wild, Vogel was really excited to watch the last Mission Impossible movie, Dead Reckoning. So we aimed to watch it the day I got back and I ended up falling asleep on the couch and had to re-watch it the next day. And now as I just got back from Go Wild again, we watched the next one. Sadly though, there's not going to be another Mission Impossible next year, so we can't continue that tradition. But also I should probably knock on wood to make sure that there isn't any more Mission Impossibles, because I think I'm done with the series and I think that's okay. It was a decent enough movie. I gave it 3.5 stars. I probably could bump it down to 3, but I feel like it deserves the half star for wrapping up the series. I will say though that the final shot of the movie was really odd. Like it just felt like we lingered on it too long, with the characters not really saying anything to each other and just kind of looking at each other and then walking away, which like I get that wrapping up a series like this can be difficult, but that felt a little bit peculiar. One of the best parts about this film though was just how manic one of the antagonists got at the end of the film. Like they'd spent both this film and the last film being very kind of like cool, calm, collected, suave, like I'm in control and such. And then in the last half of the third act, it just went completely off the deep end and we're laughing manically and acting kind of crazy. It was an interesting choice. It made for a very entertaining watch, but it was a little bit strange. I do wonder with some of the characters they introduced in this film if they're gonna try and start up a spin-off or something with those characters, but I think that leaving the series here is just fine for me. Flipping over though so that I can relearn the importance of planning things out before you put pen to paper, I was originally drawing up this space to review a different book and then realized the decoration that I picked out for it was not going to allow for pretty much any writing room. For that reason, I decided to write about the last book that I read for the month, rather than what actually came next, but the one we're doing a review for here is called The Knight and the Butcherbird, which I had not heard of until like the day before I read it, mainly because I realized I was coming up to the end of the month and I hadn't read a dystopia, which I needed for the Year in Aldea challenge. Rachel, who was doing the same prompt for the Year in Aldea challenge, recommended it to me, in particular because it was so short, and she'd also enjoyed it. This one was only like 36 pages long or something, but I was actually really impressed in how much story you can get into that few pages. This was a really interesting take on a dystopian future, mainly because it felt so real, probably helped by the fact that specific things have been referenced in that book, you know, maybe certain happenings that have occurred in the world in the last 5 or so years. I really liked the way that information was revealed through the story. I like how everything in the story felt very meaningful, probably because it is a novella, so you don't really have all of that much time to get your point across. Like, yeah, okay, the book could have been made longer or whatever, and that's actually why I only rated it 4.5 stars rather than 5, because I would just love to have had more. The little snippet that we got of this story was so well done. It didn't leave me feeling like anything had gone left unsaid or we hadn't been told key pieces of information about the world or the characters or anything really like that. But because I enjoyed it so much, I just wanted there to be more. This is my first time reading from this author, and I'd definitely be curious to read more of their work. In particular, I've heard of The 10,000 Doors of January. I don't know what it's about. I don't read blurbs, so I probably won't know what it's about until I read it, but maybe I'll put that one on my TBR too. While that one was the last book that I read in the month, I did actually have a book I read before that, which needs a review space as well. As said though, the decoration that I picked out for that one was a little bit large, and I still wanted to have writing space because I had things to say about this book, especially because I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4.5 stars, this one being City of Mirth and Malice, which is the second book in the Order and Chaos series. The first one, The House of Bane and Blood, I read as a buddy read last year, and of the 5 of us who were reading it, only 3 of us finished it, but I really enjoyed it, so I decided to keep on going. This one definitely gives me Throne of Glass kind of vibes, but in the best kind of way. I actually really loved our 2 main characters together, and I like that we get to read from both of their points of view in the books. I like that they both feel badass, but they both have complex histories, and they can understand each other's traumas, and I definitely think I need to reread the end of the book because I got confused a little bit. Which is also possibly in part why I got 4.5 stars, not 5. This series is actually going to be 2 duets, so 4 books total, or at least that's the author's plan at the moment. And the next book hasn't been announced yet, but I'll probably pick it up when it comes out. I also really like the combination of the kind of steampunk, industrial revolution vibes, also mixed with the more fantastical and kind of magic elements. I also feel like the character betrayals that we had in the first and second books both made me feel like completely gaslit, but all in all, I thought it was a really good time. One of the issues that I sometimes have with standalone series or books that are kind of like part of the same universe, but they're separate characters with separate stories, is that the later half of the book that kind of leads into the next one can sometimes feel like a big change of pace. For instance, another book that I've read this year, Lights Out, that one is part of a kind of standalone series, which are all set in the same space, universe, city, whatnot. And I found that the last third of Lights Out really kind of changes track to be more like mafia leaning, whereas the rest of the book wasn't really like that. We did have a slight tinge of that in City of Mirth and Malice, mainly as a way to shed more light onto the gods that gifted humans powers, or the powers that we see in certain individuals in the series, and you know as the reader that we're doing that so that we can kind of set up a potential conflict point in the next book and leave some questions unanswered. While that does typically bother me, and I didn't necessarily love it in this book, it didn't take away from my enjoyment so much that it got less than 4.5 stars from me. As said though, I read 9 books throughout May, which means I need to go and calculate my points for the Goober Readathon. If you hadn't heard of the Goober Readathon, this was a reading challenge hosted by myself and my co-leaders of the Bujo Buddies book club, with the general idea being to read more, or read as much as you can, during May. For me, 9 books is a very decent reading month, especially when only one of those was a novella, but how did this stack up in terms of points? From my reads specifically, I accumulated 23 points. From using one of my bonuses from last year, I got an additional 3 points, and then for the non-reading related prompts, I got an additional 12. That meant that for my Goober Readathon, I came to a total of 38 points, just slipping into the realm of Spirited Sproutologist, which is pretty dang good. Although it would have been great to be a haunting herbologist, I alas did not make it there, but I also didn't make top tier last year, so it wasn't necessarily unexpected. On to what is one of my favourite monthly layouts in my reading journal though. This one is the monthly recap. The first section is the media breakdown, and this is where I just put in how many of each type of media I consumed. For books and movies, this is consumed to completion, like I finished them, whereas for TV shows and games, this is just ones that I partook in. So I didn't actually finish the one game that I played, that one being Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and of the 3 TV shows, I only finished one of them. One of the others I'm close to finishing, and the other one I'm only like halfway through. The space to the right is where I like to put a little bar graph to show the kind of relative amounts. While it's nice to have the number written in just in general, I do like the visual of the graph. Thankfully I did have enough space to put this in. If I had have read any more books, then well, I probably could have gotten away with like one more book, but to make those bars nice and crisp, I just used some washi tape to mask the page and coloured in between the 2 pieces. If you're going to do this trick for yourself, make sure it's a washi tape that doesn't stick to the page particularly well. That is specifically what this washi tape gets used for, because it doesn't stick very well to the paper. There is a little bit of extra space there. I might go and put some decoration in, but for now we're moving on to the highlight space, and this is where I just pick 4 pieces of media that I consumed in the month that stood out in some way. This could be because I really enjoyed them, it could be because there's a special memory tied to them, but the ones that I selected were The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw, because I'd been so excited to read it and I finally got to. I picked You Season 5, because that is one of the few TV shows that I have finished to completion, so it felt like an accomplishment. I also put down City of Mirth and Malice, because that was another anticipated read for me, and One Dark Window, because it was 5 stars, I really enjoyed it, and I'm so eager to go on to the second one. The space below this though is for quotes, and I am still not great at collecting quotes throughout the month, but this time around at least I did highlight some of them as I went through, so I just had to go back to my books and look through those highlights. The ones that I ended up noting down were "Nothing is so privileged as thinking history belongs to the past." That one coming from "Everything is Tuberculosis" by John Green. And then the other two quotes I had were from City of Mirth and Malice. The first one being, "All change starts with one person pissed off enough to get their hands dirty." And the next one being, "It is not within your power to control how others see you, only how you see yourself." There were certainly other quotes that stood out from the other books that I read throughout the month, but these were three of my favourites. On to the right hand side, this page is all about statistics, with the first section being my at a glance section. On here I like to record how many pages I read, how many minutes I watched, how many series my books were from, and how many standalones I had. And typically speaking, the minutes would usually be for both TV shows and movies, but because I started some of those series in April and then kind of finished them off in May and then had some TV shows that I haven't really finished, I just did movies this time around. I think I'm gonna need a better way to track this, but in terms of the stats, we have 2,747 pages, 583 minutes across movies, and in terms of the books that I read, 4 of them were from series and 5 of them were standalones. The sections that follow these ones though, I like to put in little pie graphs for. This is one of my favorite things about reading journals is the little stats graphs. I just think they're so cute. And I like to record mine for formats read, genres read, and ratings. Flipping back so that we can have a look through all of my May reading journal pages though, it's gonna be sad to leave the Goober Readathon behind. If you partook in it, let me know what Goober tier you reached. As said, I was a spirited sproutologist, so the 4th tier out of 5, and I'm definitely looking forward to the Goober Readathon next year, but it's okay because we do still have the Year of Goober challenge, which is still going. This one offers 2 prompts to pick from for every month of the year, so it's effectively a pick your own adventure, or actually what it is a pick your own bouquet, which is like a bouquet made of books. For more information on that challenge though, we do have a separate video. This one's another free to join challenge. We would love to have you with us, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.